All right, let's dive into one of the biggest economic stories of the year, India's budget for 2026. Now, this thing it's ambitious and for a lot of people, pretty controversial. It's way more than just a financial plan. It's really a blueprint for the future that has gotten people talking, with both huge praise and some really sharp criticism.
So, what is all the fuss about? Well, the entire debate really boils down to this one single question. Is this a budget designed for the economy as a whole, or is it for the people living in it? That's the core conflict we're going to unpack today. Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to start with the government's grand vision. What were they actually trying to do with this budget? Let's take a look at the big picture. On paper, the whole thing was built on three main pillars. First, supercharging economic growth. Second, helping people achieve their aspirations. And third, making sure development is inclusive for everyone. I mean, it sounds great, right? A really powerful vision. But the question is, how did they plan to make it all happen? Well, the absolute centerpiece of this budget is a massive, and I mean massive, bet on long-term investment. The government is pretty much going all in on building the country's future, and they are putting some serious, serious money where their mouth is. And the numbers here are just staggering. They've earmarked a record 12.2 trillion rupees for what's called capital expenditure. That is a huge amount of money dedicated to building things, assets for the future, not just spending it on day-to-day expenses. So where's all this cash going? Well, it's being poured right into the foundations of the economy. We're talking new roads, upgraded railways, and just overall better logistics and connectivity. And the idea here is that this massive construction boom will ripple outwards, creating jobs and firing up economic activity all over the country. But look, this isn't just about pouring concrete and laying down tracks. It's about a really fundamental shift in what India actually makes. The goal is to kick domestic manufacturing into high gear and cut down on how much the country has to buy from abroad. And what's really interesting here is the laser focus on these high-tech sectors. We're not just talking about old-school manufacturing. This is about biopharma, about semiconductors, electronics, and even rare earth processing. It's a clear strategic play to get India a prime spot in the global supply chains of the future. Of course, all this spending has to be paid for, right? And that's where something called the fiscal deficit comes in. The government has set a pretty firm target to bring that deficit down to 4.3% of GDP. Now, this might sound a bit technical, but it's basically a signal to global investors that India is serious about being responsible with its money, which is absolutely crucial for attracting foreign investment. So that's the big economic vision, right? Long-term investments, a fiscally responsible message to the world. Sounds good. But what about the people on the ground? For many of them, this budget felt less like a blueprint for the future and more like a missed opportunity to help with their problems right now. And this was a huge, huge point of contention. Millions of taxpayers, especially the salaried middle class, were really hoping for some kind of significant tax relief. But the reality? No major tax cuts, no changes to the tax slabs, nothing. This feeling of disappointment was picked up and amplified by critics and opposition parties. They basically called the budget hollow, arguing that it shows these abstract promises of future growth over tangible, real relief that people could actually feel in their wallets today. And it wasn't just the urban middle class feeling left out. The agriculture sector also raised some pretty serious concerns. Farmers' groups were quick to point out that the budget didn't really do much to tackle their biggest headaches. Things like the rising cost of supplies, the lack of guaranteed prices for their crops, and the massive problem of unemployment in rural areas. So we've got this clear divide, right? A long-term vision for the economy on one side and short-term disappointment for the people on the other. But what did the financial markets think of all this? You'd think they'd be focused on the big picture. Yeah, you might expect the markets to be absolutely thrilled with all this investment talk. But surprisingly, the initial reaction was negative. The major stock market indices actually dropped on the day the budget was announced. So what gives? Turns out the market's reaction wasn't really about the grand vision at all. It was all about a tiny detail that had a huge impact on traders. See, the budget snuck in a tax hike on certain types of trades. That immediately makes trading more expensive, which could lead to less trading activity, and that means lower profits for brokerage firms. That one little change sent a chill through the whole market.
So, after going through all of that, what's the final verdict here? Was this a bold vision for the future of the economy, or was it a massive missed opportunity to help people who are struggling right now? Let's try and break it down one last time. This really does sum up the two completely different stories being told about this budget. On one hand, you have the good, a clear focus on building infrastructure, being smart with money, and aiming for long-term growth. But on the other hand, you have the bad, a real lack of direct relief for individuals and farmers, and a pretty nervous market reaction. If you had to boil this entire complex budget down to just one key takeaway, this is it. The government made a very clear choice. It placed a huge bet on long-term, structural growth over providing any kind of short-term populist relief. And that, of course, brings us to the ultimate question. The government is playing the long game here. They're betting that a stronger, more robust economy tomorrow is worth the pain and the patience of today. But will this massive bet actually pay off for everyone in the end? Well, that's the multi-trillion rupee question. And honestly, only time is going to tell.